former acting director of national intelligence, Ric Grenell, joins us today on Jay Sekulow Live. And folks, we are very excited to announce that Ric Grenell, former acting director of national intelligence, is joining the American Center for Law and Justice, ACLJ, as special advisor for national security and foreign policy.
Let me just say this. People by the actions that they take. And I have seen Rick, and I will tell you, Andrew Brunson is the perfect example for me of where Rick's heart is as it relates to helping people in need. This was, of course, our case where he was in jail for 2.5 years, and at 2:30 in the morning, there was our ambassador to Germany with an American flag. It's indelibly marked in my head, but also in my heart. And I want to tell you something. We're looking forward to having Rick as part of our team. He's going to add a lot of information for our audience in the coming months, and we're really excited about that, especially as these issues are going to be front and center. Rick, it is a thrill to have you with us. We're so glad you're joining us.
Yeah, thank you. I just have one rule for you guys, which is you have to call me Rick.
Well, we will call you Rick, but I will tell you this. I do this. This is kind of called habit. It's just habit. But we will call you Rick. But we are always going to acknowledge the service you've given the country and the appropriate titles you have. But we'll call you Rick, and I know our audience will be glad to know that as well. Let me say this. I want to play for you something that you said that I have some familiarity with, to say the least. But I want to get your comments on this. Let's go ahead and roll this. This involves the collusion narrative.
As acting director of national intelligence, I saw the Democrats' entire case for Russian collusion. And what I saw made me sick to my stomach. The Obama-Biden administration secretly launched a surveillance operation on the Trump campaign and silenced the many brave intelligence officials who spoke up against it. They presented bogus information as facts. They lied to judges. Then they classified anything that undermined their case.
Rick, as you know, and I lived that case for 3.5 years representing the president and still represent the president. But in that matter, of course, I lived it. And I found that it was unbelievable what we uncovered, but that the government, those in the government, not everybody, of course, but those in the government were actually doing this. And you served, of course, when you were acting DNI, you saw it firsthand. What was going on here? What was the takeout attempt here?
Look, when the Democrats say, there was some smoke, there was some suspicion, so we had to look into this and see if the Trump campaign was talking to Russia. I'm all for our government being, thorough, right? So I take them at their word that in the beginning that they had some suspicions. But Jay, I got to tell you, when you look at the evidence, quickly there were career Foreign Service officers who said, this is baloney, this is not true, the Russians are playing propaganda. The warnings from inside the intelligence community were real and prominent. And yet we had leaders of DOJ and the FBI and CIA that were willing to push away and classify those warnings and silence those warnings because they had an agenda. They weaponized government and they overruled those who warned. You just got to look at two things. Look at all of the declassified footnotes from the reports which talk about the warnings, which talk about individuals. There's also reports that still need to come out that highlight individuals, career officials who gave early warnings and who were silenced and pushed away. Those reports still need to come out. And I would say lastly is even the political people that were briefed. When you look at what they said on CNN and MSNBC, it's dramatically different than what they said under oath in the bowels of Congress during a House committee meeting. It's there. You can go to the DNI website. You can read the transcript from Susan Rice and from Samantha Power and all these individuals who in public would say this is, outrageous collusion. And then in private, they would say, I didn't see anything. There's nothing illegal. So, lastly, I'll just say Susan Rice sent an email to herself on Inauguration Day trying to say, oh, we did everything by the book. Now, come on. Who sends after the fact emails to say I did everything that I was supposed to do. You only do that when you're thinking, oh gosh, I don't think I did everything I was supposed to do, so I better paper over something for the record. We all know that to be true. That's exactly what happened. We just got lucky in that she literally sent the email when Trump was already president. After 12 o'clock on Inauguration Day, she was still sitting in the White House. And at 12:15, the email shows that she sent an email to herself under the Trump presidency, not under the Obama presidency. And that's how we got it, is that she was still in her office and sending emails to herself after the transition of power had happened.
Jordan?
Rick, you talked about Joe Biden's record as a politician. I want to play this for people. You talked about how many years he's had, and this idea of new ideas coming from Joe Biden. Take a listen, folks.
Every time Joe Biden offers a new idea, you should ask yourself, why didn't he try that over the last 48 years?
And then, Rick, you talked about, too, like, is it going to be a return back to just sending pallets of cash to Iran? And Joe Biden's promised he's going to restart the Iranian nuclear deal. How dangerous is that? I mean, you were the ambassador to Germany. They were concerned about that. You were also acting DNI. I mean, how dangerous would just that old way of thinking, it's not a new idea, of just going back to the same and restarting a nuclear deal with Iran, and also this idea that Joe Biden somehow is going to have new ideas after he's been a politician for 48 years?
Yeah, look, it's the Washington way. It's the Washington story, right? I mean, you look at Schumer, you look at Pelosi, they've been there for decades. And so, the idea that they're going to bring change to this place or new ideas is ridiculous. That's just not going to happen. And I keep saying to people, this city, Washington, D.C., where I am, it's no longer a fight between Republicans and Democrats. It is a fight between the Washington status quo people who love their power, want to hide information from the American people because when they control the information, they get power. It's them versus the rest of America. And this is the same old story in Europe. It's the Berlin establishment versus the rest of Germany and the hardworking Germans. And so it's over and over and over again. I think it's the same old elites. And of course, they get their power and they want to control it. Lastly, I'll just say about Joe Biden's foreign policy. The word consensus sounds really good, right? It sounds like, oh, it's, agreeable. But in foreign policy, I can tell you after 8 years of being at the UN inside the Security Council, if you're looking for consensus, that means 15 countries get to veto our idea, and we have the lowest common denominator of what we all believe. And so Joe Biden's foreign policy philosophy is governed by consensus. We're not going to do anything unless the Europeans sign off. And so you know what that means is that Berlin, Paris, and London get to veto what Washington says. If we have an idea and they don't like it, we don't do it. That's what gave us the Paris Climate Accord, and it gave us the JCPOA. Both of them are documents that are the lowest common denominator of what a bunch of countries think, and it is not good for the American people. We are the only country in the world that gets in trouble when we decide that we want to make decisions for ourselves. I can tell you the 192 countries at the UN that I spent 8 years with, every one of them fights for themselves and for their people, and they don't apologize for it.
You brought up, Rick, this is Logan, by the way. Hello. You brought up working with the UN, working with Germany, but you also spent a lot of time on America First and the America First platform. For you, though, having to take that point of view and then work with Germany, work with the UN, what is that like, and how do you represent, sort of like you said, sort of the nationalist point of view to all of those other places throughout the world?
Look, I think you got to be authentic when it comes to diplomacy. I never wore a tie in Germany. Very few times have I met with, the chancellor or something. But there were times that I just wanted to be myself. I wanted to be casual diplomat. And authentic and real, and have a conversation and share what the U.S. position is. We live in modern times. You can read what our policy is on Twitter or on Instagram. And so I think the answer is be authentic, be yourself. Don't try to be something that you're not. And also always remember you represent the American people, not just Washington, D.C.
Rick, I want to say again how excited and encouraged we are to have you as part of our team, especially as a special advisor on national security issues and foreign policy. There's going to be a lot of those in the months ahead, weeks ahead.
Thanks, Rick. And again, folks, Rick will be joining us throughout the broadcasting. So, throughout each week, he'll be writing some for ACLJ as well. So you would check that out. That'll be exclusive content for the ACLJ website. So it's great to have Rick on board. Rick,
let me say one other thing, and that is, look, these issues that Ric Grenell has dealt with for many years, decades, are going to be the front and center issues that our country's facing in the weeks, months, and years ahead. So getting this kind of expertise and being able to bring that to our audience, we're just thrilled to have Ric Grenell to be part of the team.
Because of your support, because of the support of every member of the ACLJ, one of the practice areas that we've been able to develop is Freedom of Information Act requests, or FOIA requests.
It's thousands of pages of paper, and in those thousands of pages of paper, you usually find a nugget.
Government agencies acting out of control.
We have exposed that in our FOIA litigation, and we do that every day that we bring these cases.
It is your statutory right as an American citizen to have access to documents that reveal how the government is functioning, how your government is functioning.
We took it to the IRS. No one ever does that.
What the IRS was doing was violating the Constitution and statutory law. They can't do what they were doing before.
They've been hiding behind in the shadows. These FOIAs bring them to light.
How do we know? Because our FOIA litigation got that document.
Those of you that support the ACLJ, this is what it's all about at the end of the day.
Think we haven't been on this, folks? We've been on it. Hey, welcome back to Jay Sekulow Live. So we're going to get into, that was great to have, and to announce to you that not only was Ric Grenell our guest, former acting director of national intelligence, a cabinet member in the Trump administration, and former U.S. ambassador to Germany, not only was our guest today, but we had a special announcement for all of you, and that he is going to join the ACLJ as a special advisor for national security and foreign policy. And I just want to let you know, we're able to bring in people like this, so he'll be regularly on the broadcast, even by video. For those of you who watch the Facebook and Periscope broadcast, he was via Skype, so you can see it as well. And he'll be writing at least once a week exclusive content for the ACLJ. So exclusive for you. We're able to do all of that because you support the work of the ACLJ. We're able to bring these experts in so that we can bring them to you, especially during this heightened time during an election year, leading up to 2 months
Especially
out.
with these policies. These are going to be the big issues that the foreign
Huge
policy,
issues.
of course, you got the domestic issues, which we know, but the foreign policies are going to be big.
Oh, with the
because they're
Durhams out there and all that stuff. I mean,
yeah.
So, again, it was great to have Rick and welcome him to our team as well.
Yeah, and so your support of the ACLJ makes a huge difference. Let me bring in two of our experts, also additional experts. That is Professor Harry Hutchison, our Director of Policy, and our Senior Counsel, Andy Economo. I want to start with a question first, and we'll get to some other things, and that is one of the things, Andy, I'm going to give this one to you. Andy, that I talked to Rick about was when Rick mentioned that when he became the acting DNI, he saw firsthand exactly what was going on, and it was a counterintelligence effort against the campaign, and they secretly launched the surveillance of this counterintelligence investigation, and it continued while he was president. And we know that from our experience in dealing with Bob Mueller and his team for 2.5 years.
That's right, Jay. What the purpose of the Bob Mueller investigation was, as the president said from the very beginning, a hoax, an attempt to tie him in with Russia in colluding to effect and to influence the presidential election. We knew that 18 prosecutors couldn't find anything, and for 2.5 years literally tortured the president of the United States and wasted the taxpayers' money, millions and millions of dollars, in a hunt for something that didn't exist. Ric Grenell comes in here, unmasks the people who participated in this, and confirms what we knew all along and what Robert Mueller tried to hide, and that is that there was no collusion and there was absolutely nothing that the president of the United States had done wrong, that the Obama administration had weaponized the FBI, had weaponized the Justice Department to spy on the campaign of his opponent, and to make up a story that we now have exploded into mythology.
Harry, I was going to ask you this. One of the other things that Rick talked about was that putting America first is not something that we should be ashamed to do. In fact, he said, in dealing at the UN, don't kid yourself. All of those countries are putting their leadership first. It's just our policies have sometimes taken a more of a consensus approach, which I believe was detrimental to America. What's your view on that and what you heard from Ric Grenell?
Well, I think Ric Grenell was absolutely correct. Counterintelligence officials are basically elites. They're part of a permanent bureaucracy who prefer to demean the intelligence of ordinary Americans. They seek to install themselves as permanent leaders of the republic, contrary to the text of the Constitution. Many of them are globalists, and what that means in practice is that the United States must take second place, and American interests must take second place to the interests of globalists. And President Trump has ended that approach, and he has offered an America First approach that puts American working people ahead of working people in every other country in the world. That is appropriate. This is the United States. This is not the United Nations.
Just so you know, there was some news made on the show today, and that is that a former acting director of national intelligence, that's a cabinet-level position in the Trump administration, Ric Grenell, has joined the American Center for Law and Justice as a special advisor for national security and foreign policy, be appearing on the broadcast, and you'll get to actually see him via Skype. And he'll be writing once a week for ACLJ.org, exclusively for you. For that won't be content that'll be anywhere else but the ACLJ's website.
Yeah, and look, as these issues, the foreign policy issues and national security issues are going to be the forefront, certainly during the next eight weeks in this election, but also going forward. So bringing an expert that served in the cabinet, we've had that privilege with John Ashcroft, and this is great also.
Yeah, because it was a reminder of how much this first term has been attempted to be undermined by that intelligence community that Rick oversaw.
Yeah,
he oversee when you're acting DNI, you oversee every single branch of the intelligence, and he saw. And for 3 years, basically, they tried to put the Trump administration on its heels.
No question.
And the president was still able to accomplish a lot domestically, economically, and when it came to foreign policy, but not without a lot of pain and suffering for the country.
Oh, and a lot of work for his lawyers, and a lot of pressure that puts on
the president.
But he did a great job. Now, Lieutenant General Kellogg spoke. I've gotten to work with him. I'm an admirer of General Kellogg. He's basically the national security advisor for the vice president. He made an interesting point. I want everybody to listen to it. I'm going to get our experts' comments.
Over the past 3.5 years, I have witnessed every major foreign policy and national security decision by the president. I have been in the room where it happened. I saw only one agenda and one guiding question when tough calls had to be made. Is this decision right for America?
So, Harry, I'm going to start with you. From a policy standpoint, we've always taken the position, is this right for America? Is this right for our citizens? That has to be the starting point, doesn't it?
Absolutely. But it has not always been the starting point. And so that is what is so starkly different about President Trump. He is actually putting America's interests first, while globalists like former President Barack Obama, they were prepared to give money to terrorists in order to secure, for instance, the Iranian nuclear deal. This makes no sense. And so here you have a president who took out al-Baghdadi, who took out Qasem Soleimani, who took out ISIS essentially in the Middle East, while President Barack Obama in 2014 suggested that ISIS was simply the JV team, the junior varsity team. So President Trump is consistently looking out for American interest, and he is acting upon that principle.
All right, so Andy, I want to finish this segment up because then we're going to get into some other issues, but I want to finish this one up. Ambassador Grenell did say this. Rick did say this, and that he saw a counterintelligence move against a presidential campaign. That's how he summed it up.
And he was right, Jay, because it was a counterintelligence move spearheaded by the Obama Justice Department and the Obama FBI. It was an attempt to undermine the President of the United States, both as a candidate and, let's not forget, in the transition. They sent people in there to try to get Flynn to lie or to get him to say something that wasn't the case without counsel. And it was a concerted effort to undermine the president's administration. Why don't we say that? Why doesn't the media say that? Because they're scared to tell the truth. America first.
Yeah, there you go. All right, we're taking a break. When we come back, more discussion.
Because of your support, because of the support of every member of the ACLJ, one of the practice areas that we've been able to develop is Freedom of Information Act requests, or FOIA requests.
It's thousands of pages of paper, and in those thousands of pages of paper, you usually find a nugget.
Government agencies acting out of control.
We have exposed that in our FOIA litigation, and we do that every day that we bring these cases.
It is your statutory right as an American citizen to have access to documents that reveal how the government is functioning, how your government is functioning.
We took it to the IRS. No one ever does that.
What the IRS was doing was violating the Constitution and statutory law. They can't do what they were doing before.
They've been hiding behind in the shadows. These FOIAs bring them to light.
How do we know? Because our FOIA litigation got that document.
Those of you that support the ACLJ, this is what it's all about at the end of the day.
Think we haven't been on this, folks? We've been on it.
President Donald Trump appoints to a G7 country Ric Grenell.
Historic moment, nearly a year in the making for U.S. Ambassador to Germany, Richard Grenell.
Obviously, you served many years at the United Nations, so you come at this with a depth of knowledge and experience. You're ready to go.
When you work at the UN and you see the world the way it is, you're reminded that when it comes to liberty and human rights and a whole bunch of issues, we're on the same page.
In addition to being the ambassador to Germany, when Andrew Brunson was released from prison in Turkey, and finally got out of Turkish airspace and landed in Germany at 2:30 in the morning, who met him at the airport with an American flag? Ambassador Ric Grenell.
They're rushing us to the airport. There was an Air Force plane that came from Germany that had been on standby.
My wife and I came down the stairs of the plane, and there was somebody waiting for us. And I found out that it was Richard Grenell, and he was standing there with an American flag and handed it to me and said, "Welcome home." So grateful for all that my country had done for me.
Our allies are dying to see an action plan. They're hungry for U.S. leadership.
Then Ric Grenell becomes the acting director of national intelligence.
My next guest did more to expose government corruption than most Washington insiders have done in years.
And he has the guts and the timidity to unleash and unmask the unmaskers, so to speak.
We do now know, though, why the acting DNI, Ric Grenell, was over at the Department of Justice last week. It was to deliver a declassified list of names of Obama administration officials who were behind the unmasking of General Michael Flynn after Flynn was picked up during the presidential transition.
As acting director of national intelligence, I saw the Democrats' entire case for Russian collusion. And what I saw made me sick to my stomach. The Obama-Biden administration secretly launched a surveillance operation on the Trump campaign and silenced the many brave intelligence officials who spoke up against it.
Transparency is never political. Transparency is what the American people demand, and it's what Washington, D.C. is very uncomfortable with.
I want to go to this one. I want to play Mike Pence, Vice President of the United States, powerful speech, talking about foreign policy issues, and I want to get Harry and Andy's comments on that. Here we go, number 8.
Joe Biden criticized President Trump following those decisions. Decisions to rid the world of 2 terrorist leaders. But it's not surprising, because history records that Joe Biden even opposed the operation that took down Osama bin Laden. It's no wonder that the Secretary of Defense under the Obama-Biden administration once said that Joe Biden has been, and I quote, wrong on nearly every major foreign policy and national security issue over the past 4 decades.
And that's why we're thrilled at the ACLJ to bring on as our special advisor Ric Grenell to deal with the issues of national security and foreign policy. But Harry, quickly, that was quite a statement coming from the vice president.
Absolutely. And Joe Biden cannot rebut that statement. And so Joe Biden has been wrong on virtually every foreign policy decision for the last 40 years. Meanwhile, President Trump has put America first. We have stood with our allies, and we have stood up to our enemies. We have moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, the capital of the state of Israel, and that has set the stage for the first Arab country to recognize Israel in 26 years. So President Trump is a doer. Vice President Biden is simply an individual who seems lost in space.
And I think when you compare the two, again, just look at one issue. We talked about Iran with Ric Grenell earlier, but he made this statement, about the differences in how they'd be approaching Iran. You talked about with the nuclear deal with Mike Pence talking about that. How about just with what's happened by the Trump administration? Remember, Ric Grenell talked a lot about we're not starting wars, we were ending wars. And how are we doing that? By strategically taking out Iranian terrorist leaders. So listen to this bite, though. I thought it was just very telling because it's absolutely true. Bite 64.
A return to the Biden way of thinking means America gives the radical terrorist regime in Tehran a plane load of cash in the middle of the night. Well, you see, President Trump also sent an aircraft in the middle of the night to deal with Iran. But that plane was on a different mission. An airstrike to take out the head of Iran's terror machine who plotted the deaths of Americans.
Heard a lot from Iran recently?
Yeah, not much.
You hear a lot of them. They're dealing with COVID crisis. No. Had heard a lot about their nuclear program? No. So think about that difference, too.
Let me say something here to our audience and our friends. First of all, thank you for your support of the ACLJ. It's keeping this broadcast on the air. It keeps our lawyers fighting for families around the country. It keeps us engaged in defending freedom, defending Israel in international tribunals. We couldn't do it without you. Keeps, as I said, brings you experts like Andy and Harry and Wes and Skip, and now former acting director of national intelligence, cabinet member Ric Grenell, former ambassador to Germany. We can do that only because of your support for the ACLJ.
Because of your support, because of the support of every member of the ACLJ, one of the practice areas that we've been able to develop is Freedom of Information Act requests or FOIA requests.
It's thousands of pages of paper, and in those thousands of pages of paper, you usually find a nugget.
Government agencies acting out of control.
We have exposed that in our FOIA litigation, and we do that every day that we bring these cases.
It is your statutory right as an American citizen to have access to documents that reveal how the government is functioning, how your government is functioning.
We took it to the IRS. No one ever does that.
What the IRS was doing was violating the Constitution and statutory law. They can't do what they were doing before.
They've been hiding behind in the shadows. These FOIAs bring them to light.
How do we know? Because our FOIA litigation got that document.
Those of you that support the ACLJ, this is what it's all about at the end of the day.
Think we haven't been on this, folks? We've been on it.